2025's budget, that is the first quarter from July to September. And a lot of the details, of course, are emerging as a result of that report, which I'm briefing you shortly, which now includes that counties, remember, yesterday President William Ruto signed the DORA, that is the Division of Revenue Allocation Bill of 2024, which is an amendment one, that has now pushed the equitable share for counties from a whopping 380 billion to 387 billion. This is an increase by 2 billion Kenya shillings compared to the last fiscal year of 2023-2024. In this case, county governments in the first quarter, that is from July to September, generated on-source revenue of 12.6 billion Kenya shillings against an annual target of 82 billion Kenya shillings. Basically, actually of 85 billion Kenya shillings. Basically, how counties fund their budgets, usually out of the set budget. Let's say, for instance, the Nairobi County, on-source revenue is the money collected as taxes in that particular county, while the rest is drawn from the equitable share, that is the money from the national treasury to counties, which we refer to as the equitable share. And so the on-source revenue is money, of course, generated from parking fees, the licenses, etc. And in this case, in the first quarter of this fiscal year, counties only generated 12 billion Kenya shillings on-source revenue against a target of 85.2 billion Kenya shillings. For instance, Nairobi County, which has a target of 20 billion Kenya shillings, has only generated an on-source revenue of 2.2 billion Kenya shillings. If this trend is anything to go by the end of this fiscal year, Nairobi County could likely collect 8 billion Kenya shillings out of the 20 billion target. That translates to a deficit of 12 billion, which, if the budget will not be slashed, in this case Nairobi County with over 43 billion budget, there is a likelihood that the 12 billion will translate to pending bills. And that, remember, has been the headache, especially in the national government and the counties in this case. Now, as of 30th September 2024, according to the Control of Budget, the outstanding pending bills amount to 168.2 billion Kenya shillings. In this case, Nairobi County, remember, which if they will not slash their budget or meet the revenue on-source revenue targets, there is a likelihood of a 12 billion shortfall. In this case, it's leading with the total pending bills stock at 62%, which is 121 billion. So, in this case, what I mean is out of 168 billion Kenya shillings pending bills by counties, Nairobi County has 121 billion Kenya shillings. Surprisingly, it has only paid about 200 million out of the 121 billion Kenya shillings. This is what we'll be discussing this morning, as far as that, how that actually affects you having money in your pocket in what we refer to as liquidity. If there is no liquidity, that is why, despite the inflation coming down to 2.8%, you still not be having money in your pocket. And so the issue of the pending bills, with the national government having more than 650 billion Kenya shillings, also the pending bills. However, there is an ongoing pending bills verification committee looking into the eligible and the ineligible pending bills. As far as the total expenditure for the counties is concerned, the 55 billion Kenya shillings is what the counties spent in the first 3 months of this fiscal year. And out of the amount, 48 billion Kenya shillings was spent on the recurrent expenditure, while a paltry 6.7 billion Kenya shillings went to development. Surprisingly, despite counties spending 6.7 billion Kenya shillings in terms of their, of course, development, counties like Nairobi, Kisii, Nyandarua, Baringo, and 6 others incurred no development expenditure. In other words, in Nairobi, in the first 3 months of this financial year, Nairobi Governor Johnson Sakaja did not spend any coin on development, despite already having spent about 3 billion. This is basically, of course, for salaries, allowances, tea and mandazi, and as well travel expenditure. And so these also will inform, of course, how our economy performs, considering when you pay development, of course, money to the suppliers or to various contractors, that money brings the liquidity in the market. This is what we'll be focusing on as far as the control of budget report is concerned, even as we actually touch on the report by the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly, which has now tabled, of course, its report on the Tax Procedure Amendment Bill of 2024 and the Tax Laws Amendment Bill of 2024. The two bills are seeking to inject a whopping 178 billion Kenya shillings in the ongoing fiscal year, and so we'll be looking into it. Of course, it will actually prompt a supplementary budget too. Remember, supplementary budget 1 came shortly after the start of the financial year, which is a rare occasion, but it was triggered by the withdrawal of the finance bill of 2024. So the inflation rate, if today you are asked, stands at 2.8%. When President William Ruto was addressing the National Assembly during the State of the Nation address, he stated that it was at 2.7%. And so there is a jump from 2.7% in October to 2.8% in the month of November. Kenya's debt stock is now at 10.56 trillion Kenya shillings, with the external debt being about 5.15, while that of the domestic debt stands at 5.4 trillion Kenya shillings. This basically translates to a ratio of 49 external and 51 domestic. These, according to economic pundits, at times creates, of course, a situation where, due to the high interest rates, then the MSMEs are unable to access the loans, of course, as part of their capital or to boost their businesses. In studio, I'll be joined by very key guests in this conversation. That is Ruth Kinyanjui. She is an economist. Honorable Dr. Daniel Manduku, a member of the Debt and Privatization Committee of the National Assembly, at a time that we're having, of course, discussions around the debt stock, pending bills, and as well the public-private partnership, what is commonly referred to as PPP. Similar case to what Adani was seeking, of course, to help the country upgrade the JKA and as well our transmission lines in the K24, that is energy docket. And so he will actually be giving us insights in what should be considered while we enter the PPPs. Honorable Dr. John Ariko is a member of the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly. He will be talking to us about the two amendment bills that are before the House that are seeking to inject 178 billion Kenya shillings. But I also invite you in this conversation via social media platforms at K24 TV, at Joel Chashazolo on SMS, and WhatsApp numbers on the bottom of your screens. But before getting to that conversation with my guests, let's focus on these stories, where a day after President William Ruto called out Kenyans for opposing government projects and church offerings by politicians, the Catholic Church has called for harmony in the country. Nairobi Archbishop Philip Anyolo says that all Kenyans must be constructive in their words, thoughts, and mind for the sake of peace and unity in the country. Speaking while officially opening a maternity and theatre wing at Cardinal Otunga Health Center in Mangu area, Gatundu North, the Archbishop said that despite the hardships being faced in the country and across the globe, everyone has an obligation to work towards maintaining and upholding peace and tranquility.
We talk negatively and not helping anything, but let us be constructive in our doing things, and let us be constructive in our thoughts and in our deeds and even in our words. I think it's very important. Let us not talk about the government, let us not talk about anybody, but each one of us should have that sense of feeling that he is part and parcel of the development of the country of Kenya, and is part and parcel of peace creation and the environment making in Kenya. We want to ask every Kenyan, thick and thin.
We now focus on this story that also will form a better part of the conversation this morning. Parliament should take control of their budget process to enhance financial accountability in how the country's contracts and manages its debt. Organizations from economic think tanks and development partners emphasize that Kenya's path to debt recovery should start with a thorough audit of the current public debt stock and debt registry, alongside a strategy to avoid costly foreign commercial loans, as our very own Linda Koskei now reports.
Right now, the Republic cannot afford not to borrow anymore just to keep finances where they are, just to maintain, to prevent the bottom from falling off. The borrowing has to come.
The National Treasury figures reveal that as of June 2023, Kenya's public debt accounted for 70.8% of the gross domestic product GDP, with domestic debt at 4.9 trillion shillings and external debt reaching 5.5 trillion shillings.
About 2.5 trillion shillings is owed to multilateral banks. 1.37 trillion is owed to commercial banks. 880 billion is owed to China. We have seen in the case of the Eurobond, where the handling of foreign loan proceeds outside Kenya meant that the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget had no sight of the transactions.
To mitigate this situation, the government is pursuing fiscal discipline and shifting capital-intensive infrastructure projects to public-private partnerships.
And you're now borrowing from people with, I'd say, diverse reputations. That's my word. Reputations of different kinds. You just have to borrow from everybody to keep everything running.
Experts point out that there are additional issues that need to be addressed to curb Kenya's borrowing habits.
The government always brings debt ceilings to Parliament for approval, and then treats the approval of debt ceiling as an approval of a loan. In other words, the government treats the approval of a capacity as parliamentary commitment to borrow.
The National Treasury has announced plans to clean up the country's debt registry in an effort to provide a transparent view of the public debt situation. This announcement was made during the launch of a report analyzing Kenya's debt from 2000 to 2024. Recommendations include Parliament taking full control of the budget-making process and ensuring transparency and detail in project components.
In the last 10 years, the debt ceiling, or what we call debt ceiling, which is a suggestion, completely useless as a policy instrument for managing debt. Every time the Treasury came before Parliament and sought its expansion, it was done 7 times. So you have to ask yourself, what value is it if there is no controls around that area?
It is actually just black and white. It is the mandate and responsibility of Parliament. Based on what has happened in the political economy, Parliament and the entire political class know they're in trouble with the people. Because this is no longer 2016, where a few experts would say we are in trouble because of debt. We all know we are in trouble because of debt. That is why they will not set up the IEBC.
Currently, Kenya has managed to avert a default. Interest rates from bilateral lenders such as International Monetary Fund remained low, with repayments on its 234 billion shillings bond starting in 2029.
I can assure you the economic issues are tough. They are very complex. We are rarely able to speak to them in ways that get to the people. A very unique collaboration of technocrats in this area, people who are skilled in campaigns, and then Gen Zs on all their streets. We pressure government and we go back to what was intended when people were in bombers, where Parliament as a representative of the people, not of the president, are the ones that are determining how we budget, how we raise taxes, and how we acquire and utilize debt.
Linda Koskei, K24 TV.
Meanwhile, the government is yet again seeking to impose charges on those registering for identification cards. In the proposal, Kenyans will part with 300 Kenya shillings for a new ID, while those seeking to replace their IDs will pay 1,000 Kenya shillings. According to the Interior Ministry, the move has been prompted by inflation and improved security details on the document following a rise in fraud. The Delegated Legislation Committee of the National Assembly, however, terms the reasons as not good enough to burden taxpayers with new levies and fees. Kenyans should anticipate a grim 2025 if two bills before the National Assembly sail through. The Births and Deaths Registration Amendment Rules 2024 and the Registration of Persons Amendment Rules 2024 are now seeking, among other issues, to introduce registration charges for a new national identification card at 300 Kenya shillings, while replacement will cost 1,000 Kenya shillings.
This was to provide for the application for registration acknowledgement to the new applicants in place of application for certificate, which has been surpassed by digitization of payment on eCitizen. Initially, before digitization, we used to have a physical waiting card, what they call waiting card. So we are now providing for an electronic waiting card under this regulation.
According to the Interior Ministry, through the Principal Secretary for Immigration and Citizen Services, Julius Bitok, the move has been necessitated by inflation, security concerns, and to curb wastage. The Delegated Legislation Committee of the National Assembly is not convinced that the provided reasons are enough to burden Kenyans with new levies and fees just to acquire the crucial documents from the government.
But recently, I carried out an activity in partnership with the Civil Registration Department, and everyone was asked to pay 300 shillings. That means we have already implemented the regulations we are presenting here without approval. So I want to be informed, how did that change from 100 to 300?
In the coming days, it will be a requirement in law, probably, to share data of registration persons, especially those are above or those who have attained the age of majority, in real time. It's extremely important.
Last year, a similar attempt was made through a Gazette notice, which the court squashed. Kenyans overwhelmingly expressed their dissatisfaction regarding the move, which saw a reduction in the proposed rates. Joel Chacha, K24 TV, Nairobi. Away from that, Kiambu Senator Karungo Wathangwa has been directed to the DCI headquarters along Kiambu Road. The senator had on Wednesday presented himself at the Central Region DCI headquarters, where he was directed to appear in person along the DCI Kiambu Road today. The investigation pertains chaos witnessed at a funeral service in Limuru last week, where the former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua was in attendance.
The Kiambu senator was summoned to appear at the Central Region DCI headquarters last Friday, following chaos that erupted at a funeral in Limuru on Thursday, where former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua was in attendance. Through his lawyer, Ndegwanjiro, the senator said he had no information that would aid the investigations at the time.
Those are baseless allegations that are meant to intimidate the people of Kenya. It's only a vacillating and hopeless person who is keen on silencing people who can craft such kind of a hopeless maneuver.
The victim cannot become the accused, and that these investigations are a sham. They are calculated to protect those who attacked people in a funeral in Limuru.
In a fresh twist of events, the senator has now been summoned to appear at the DCI headquarters along Kiambu Road. His counterpart, the former MP for Limuru, Peter Mwadhi, who had been summoned earlier but had accompanied the senator to Nyeri, was also summoned to appear without fail on Thursday.
So again, tomorrow, we have been summoned again at DCI headquarters, where we were on Thursday night, where they refused to listen to us. Nevertheless, I would say the officers that we found here, they were able to listen to us. We listened to them.
With me here are summons to appear without fail tomorrow, 8 a.m. at DCI Nairobi to answer charges of what I don't know.
See, these guys are on a fishing expeditions. They basically do not understand what they are looking for. Any person who is speaking against Mr. William Ruto, against ile pepo mbaya inafanyika hapa nchini, is becoming a victim.
The leaders took a swipe at President William Ruto over his remarks on Kenyans who were opposed to their Adani deals.
You want to tell us now hatutakuwa tunaenda mazishi kwa sababu kuna jamaa amekasirika? Hatutakuwa tunazika watu wetu? Hatutakuwa tunaenda harambee kanisani ama hatutaenda worship kanisa kwa sababu kuna jamaa moja amekasirika? Hapana. Hapana, sisi si mapepo, tuliambiwa sisi ni mapepo.
The political leaders stated that they will continue to support the former DP as well as keep the government in check. Edwin Mbogwa, K24.
Our focus now on matters education. Kasarani Group of Schools has denied being among the 348 boarding schools listed for failing to meet safety standards for boarding schools, insisting that it was wrongly included as it doesn't offer even boarding facilities. The school has criticized the Ministry of Education for the error, saying it has caused unnecessary panic amongst parents. Similarly, Ruffin Group of Schools, which claims full compliance, is in talks with the Ministry of Education to resolve the issue. Members of Parliament have also criticized the Ministry of Education for biased assessment, as our very own Harry Chimea now reports.
There is growing concern among parents after the Ministry of Education recently listed 348 boarding schools as failing to meet essential safety and security standards, further instructing them to operate as day schools instead of boarding schools. Among the schools named is Kasarani Group of Schools, which has hit back, claiming they were wrongly included. The school, which does not even offer boarding facilities, says the ministry's error has caused unnecessary panic among parents.
And most disturbing phone calls that we got were from the parents who had intended to bring their children to school in the year 2025 that were scheduled for an interview on the 6th and the 7th of December. They were calling to find out, is the interview still on? Are we closed? Do we look for another school?
They say it is more concerning that they got the information from media outlets calling on the Ministry of Education to make a clarification.
We would wish that the Ministry of Education clarifies for us whether our school is in that list or maybe there was an error in typing. Our school doesn't have a boarding school, and therefore we feel that this was not very well verified.
Similarly, Ruffin Group of Schools has also found itself caught up in the matter, insisting that it is fully compliant with all safety regulations. The school is now in talks with the ministry to clear up the confusion. Kangundo Deb Primary School, which hosts over 100 blind students, was also listed, causing confusion on whether the school will be shut down.
Kwa nini wao wasi-improve the facilities ambazo ziko pale ambazo zinawahusisha walemavu, watoto wetu ambao ni walemavu, ili waweze kupata elimu ambao inastahili.
So ideally then our schools have to be boarding to be able to accommodate these learners, because they can't commute daily from their homes to all the special schools around the country. And so it's a bit appalling when we learn that a few of our schools have been deregistered as boarding units because of not having met certain standards.
As the situation unfolds, the Kenya Primary School Heads Association has emphasized that the 348 schools will not be closed but will operate as day schools if they do not rectify the issues come January 6th.
The schools are not closed, as some have reported in the press. No school has been closed. What was closed at the boarding part of the school. Some of the things were as little as some of the school did not have 2 doors. You agree with me, in 2-3 weeks a school can put a door. There were others which did not have things like firefighting materials. And I think those are things they buy.
At the same time, members of parliament have accused the Ministry of Education for biased assessments.
Some were given 3 months to comply, others a month to comply, and even others 2 weeks. But Honourable Speaker, what is most shocking is that the ministry officials did not go back after 3 months to confirm compliance by reinspection of such schools.
We want to appeal to the ministry to suspend this decision for some time so that we can even factor the expenditure into the budgets so that we improve the situation.
Advise the Chair Education that tomorrow afternoon he should bring a statement to assure the country, one, the cogent reasons for closing such many schools, and what measures are they putting in place to mitigate the inconvenience, loss that may be suffered by both the schools, the parents, and the students.
Harriet Chimea, K24.
Well, and as promised today, being on a Thursday, even as we focus on 2024 economic performance, in studio already I'm joined by Honorable Dr. Daniel Manduku, a member of the Debt and Privatization Committee of the National Assembly. Thank you so much for getting time.
Thank you.
One would ask, what is the current debt stock?
Thank you for inviting me once again to the studio. The last time I checked, the Kenyan government owes a total of 11.3 trillion shillings to both domestic and foreign debt. The mixed ratio is 55% being domestic and 45% of that debt being foreign debt.
What did the committee approve in terms of the ratios?
In our medium-term debt strategy, the National Assembly approved a mixed ratio of 70 to 30, 70% being foreign debt and 30% being domestic debt.
So we've already surpassed what the National Assembly required of us.
We have not just surpassed the ratio, we have also surpassed the threshold, which was set at 55% of GDP. Today, our debt stock is about 67% of GDP, which is way above the approved ratio of 55%.
So in other words, we are in distress. Allow me at this juncture to take a short commercial break. 11.3 trillion Kenya shillings is the national debt stock, according to Honorable Manduku, who is the member of the Debt and Privatization Committee of the National Assembly. Shortly, we'll be joined by Honorable Dr. John Ariko, member of the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly, and as well Ruth Kinyanjui, an economist. We take a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.